Good afternoon, everybody. We are here today gathered to focus on this particular lesson here entitled One Race, Many Nations, Early Human History. So throughout this particular lesson here, we'll be focusing on the book of Genesis, in particular, the 10th chapter, where we are talking about the story of Noah and looking at how Noah's descendants were the offsprings, or we are the offsprings or the descendants of Noah. So once again, the title of this lesson here is entitled One Race, Many Nations. The human race through the flood was reduced to righteous Noah and 7 family members. As a result of sin and God's judgment, human history received a new beginning. After the flood, the human population grew again, but did not follow God's directive to fill the earth. As a result, God took action to inhibit their ability to work together and to bring about his plan. Okay, so right there it said his plan, because as human beings, sometimes we get in the way of God's plan, and you don't want to get in the way of God's plan. And so clearly you can see that during this time frame, the humans were doing their own thing, but it was not of God's plan. And so now that's when God got to step in and show them and remind them that he is God and that they need to be listening to him and not what they totally wants to do. All right. So here is the opening entitled Feeling Left Out. What settings have you been in where you didn't understand the language being spoken? How did you feel? So this is a common thing that many of us dealt with from time to time, where you're in a setting and you don't understand the language that is being spoken. You might have been in a grocery store and you heard somebody right beside you speaking in a different language. You might have been at the gas station. You could have been in Walmart. You could have been watching TV, watching a movie, and they are speaking another language. And so how did it feel? It made you feel funny, uncomfortable, because you just didn't know what they were saying. Okay. And then sometimes we have people that make jokes about it and stuff like, oh, they're talking about you, they're saying stuff about you. But honestly, you don't know what the conversation is. You don't know what they're talking about. So it does kind of make you feel funny, feeling left out. But God intended it to be that way. He did not want the entire world to be speaking the same language. And so here, let's talk about that. We're going to talk about that today and looking at, well, where did that all come from? Where did that start? Why did that even happen? Why did God do that? Why he didn't want us to speak the same language? So if you have visited a foreign country where you did not speak the language, you understand that a common language is essential for nearly everything we do with other human beings. A language barrier, on the other hand, hinders nearly everything. God wants people to communicate with one another, especially to share the message of Jesus Christ. However, it became necessary for him to confuse human language at the Tower of Babel to have them accomplish another of his purposes, the spreading out of the descendants of Noah over the whole earth. And so now, when you think about it now, every human being is a descendant of Adam, Noah, and one of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, or Jephthah. Although married before the flood, Noah's sons and their wives did not have children before the flood. Genesis, the 10th chapter, shows the nations that descended from each of Noah's sons. This account helps us understand the origins of the various nations God had used for his purposes, including the nation of Israel, through whom he sent his son, Jesus Christ. So let's look at this here. Part 1, from Noah came all nations. Subtitles: an orderly arrangement, and Jephthah Ham, and Shem. So an orderly arrangement. So the first thing we're going to look at is Genesis, the 10th chapter, the first verse. And then we're going to look at the 32nd verse. And I am using the NIV version here. And it states, this is the account of Shem, Ham, and Jephthah, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. These are the clans of Noah's sons, according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these, the nations spread out over the earth after the flood. So you and I, we are the descendants of Noah. Either we're coming from the lineage of Shem, Ham, or Jephthah. All of us, everybody on the entire earth is a descendant of Noah. So many people study geology to understand how their ancestors shaped the lives of those who came after them. The story of one's predecessors may include war, famine, and even personal attack that threatened to end the family line. God records in the Bible his own story of working through multiple generations to bring about his plan of salvation and blessing. And this is something that I am very interested about. I'm usually the one in the family that does research about our family geology because I'm just curious and stuff like that. I want to see how far back that I can go. And so like on one side of the family, I was able to go back to the early 1800s. And the other side of the family, I'm not quite there yet, but I am in the 1860s, around when the Civil War was going on. But I was just curious. I wanted to know how far back I could go. And I went on ancestry.com to conduct this research. And now what I have is a tree set up so that I could see the branches and how when one couple was together, looking at how many children they had and looking at how many those children they had, the descendants, and looking at and seeing how everybody was an offspring and how everybody was spread out or scattered all over the earth. And that is what God wanted to happen here with Noah, looking at his sons, Shem, Ham, and Jephthah. Okay. And like I said today, we are the descendants of either one of these sons here. And that's what God wanted. And so here is a question here. It says, what examples can you give of how God's work in your family, even over many generations, have shaped your life today? And so whenever we're talking about the offsprings, we're looking at culture, we're looking at race, we're looking at traditions, we're looking at their location and things about them. That is a part of who they are. But one of the things that God wanted to make sure and instill in each and every individual was that they still knew him, recognized him, and remember that he is their God and that they need to devote themselves to him. There is no other gods. So God wanted to make sure that this news here is spread from generation to generation and scattered throughout the entire earth. That was his mission. That was his goal. That's what he wanted. And so now today we can see how the earth is filled with many people from all nationalities, from all backgrounds, speaking a different language, but no matter what, they believe in God and they are devoted to him, living for him, no matter where they are from. And that's what God wanted here. That was his ultimate goal. That's what he was setting, why he was setting this up. So let's look at another verse here, also in Genesis, the 10th chapter. But let's look at the second verse. Let's look at the 6th verse. And then let's look at the 21st through the 22nd verse. And once again, I am using the NIV version. So let's look at this. The sons of Jephthah, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Teras. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. Sons were also born to Shem, whose older brother was Jephthah. Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber. The sons of Shem, Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. So here the Bible is giving us the genealogy of each of Noah's sons, from Jephthah, from Ham to Shem. And he's breaking it down and showing us how many children that each of them had. And so the nations that descended from Noah was scattered over the face of the earth according to God's plan. His plan also meant that each nation and each individual be reached centuries later with the message of Jesus Christ. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier, how God intentionally wanted this to happen this way. He wanted us to be scattered. He wanted us to be fruitful and multiply. Fruitful and multiply. And he states this throughout the book of Genesis. He says this more than one time. It starts with the creation with Adam and Eve. He tells them the same thing, that I want you to be fruitful and multiply. And then now after Adam and Eve, then the next person, the major figure, is Noah. And then when you look at Noah, Noah is told the same thing. And then after Noah, another major figure is Abraham. And God is telling them the same thing. I want you all to be fruitful and multiply. So when I was looking at the passage here too, it does talk about the breakdown of where each of the sons decided to live at. But one side note he mentioned was that Jephthah, they were the most numerous and widely spread from humanity's beginnings. The descendants of Jephthah, first recorded son Gomer, moved into Asia Minor, and then later the Balkans. So that's where Jephthah ended up residing at, in Asia Minor and the Balkans. It does talk about Javan a little bit too. He was the father of the Greeks, and it says that that was mentioned in the book of Isaiah. So that is the region where Jephthah, pretty much his descendants, resided at. And then if you look at Ham, majority of his descendants were Cush, it mentioned, was the ancestor of the Ethiopians and the Arabians. Okay, and then Shem's line was with the Persians. And then ultimately Shem family will result in being the Hebrews or Israelites, and out of this people will come the Messiah, Jesus Christ. So Shem is carrying the seed for Jesus Christ. All right, but all of them are very essential, very important, and they're living spread out and scattered. So now, after we've learned this part here about where Jephthah pretty much lived at in Asia Minor, in that region, Ham pretty much in, Africa with Ethiopia, and then Shem with the Persians, we got an idea or a better understanding of where our lineage came from. All right, and looking at which particular son we were closest to. Okay. So now let's look at part 2 now, the rest of the story here that talks about the beginning phases here. From Noah came all nations. So with part 2, it says one race united, then scattered. Okay, so first they were all united, but then scattered. And the subheadings for this one is humanity plans to settle and scattered by God. So let's look at this. Well, why God got us all together, but then eventually he began to scatter us all over the place. So what is this about? What was he really focusing on and trying to do? So let's look at Genesis now, the 11th chapter, the 1st through the 4th verse, looking at the NIV version. The Tower of Babel. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make brick and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar from mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." So clearly here, God knew what they were up to. They were thinking of only themselves. And that's not what God was about. He don't want you to be selfish and only focusing on yourselves. But here you can see what the people was about. They all spoke the same language. They spoke the same, like it says, common speech. And now all of them got together and it was like, come, let us build ourselves a city, reach into the heavens to make a name for ourselves, not for God, but for ourselves. So they're focusing on them, pushing God's ways, God's, order to the side and focusing on themselves. All right. And so from the time of Adam and Eve, the human race shared the same language. Their power of unity will be misused at this point as they set themselves to oppose God's plan together. So God was upset about this. When he saw what they were doing down here on earth, God is up there in heaven looking down and looking at them and just shaking his head like, I cannot believe they are doing this. They just pushing me all to the side, that they wouldn't have nothing if it wasn't for me. They talking about making bricks and baking them thoroughly, bricks made of stone and tar. Don't you know that you wouldn't even have any bricks or stone or tar or anything if it wasn't for me? So God is sitting there looking at them like, these people, he's like, what are they doing? What are they thinking about? Have they forgot what I've done when I destroyed the earth? Like, what is going on with them? So God said, okay, I got something for them. Since they want to sit there and plan and do their own thing, he said he got something for them. Because clearly this was going against his mission. This is going against what he wanted. He wanted the world to be spread over the entire earth. Okay, he was showing his power and his authority. That's why he wanted the world this to be spread out. And one thing that I thought about too with another incident like this, where he spreads the people out and have them from different areas, was with the story of Pentecost, and how in that particular celebration in the town at that time, it was people from different regions meeting up in that area to celebrate God. They were doing it in remembrance of God, showing their devotion and their honor towards God. But everybody there was from different places. Okay, different cultures, different traditions. They were all meeting up together. But God, in the end, wanted to do something about this right here, because this clearly was bothering him. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of the scripture here. Let's read down to the 5th through the 9th verse and look at, well, what happened. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, if, as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So, hey, the people forgot. God is in control. Y'all might be planning one thing, but he got another agenda. He got another plan. He got another idea. So they sitting up here trying to build this city up to the heavens for themselves and putting God's, objective to the side. And he's like, no, this is not happening. And God came down and scattered them all. God came down and confused everybody's speech. And now all of a sudden, everybody is speaking different languages. They cannot communicate with each other. It was very difficult for them to talk to each other, because now they don't understand what each other was saying. And God purposely did this. And then he scattered them. He scattered them. And this was the place called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. And from there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So here God was showing his powers, showing them that he is still in control, still in control. Now let's look at the next part here, part 3. From Shem came Abraham, the family of Terah, and Terah leaves for Canaan. So now looking more at the genealogy here now. So first we already done look at with Noah and his sons, and looking at ourselves too personally, trying to figure out, well, which son am I a descendant of? Where did I come from? But then the next major figure in the book of Genesis is Abraham. And this is now when we're looking at, in particular, Shem. And this is why we're focusing on Shem, to understand now Abraham, who was a major figure. Once again, he was a major figure in the book of Genesis. So now let's look at Genesis now, the 11th chapter, the 10th through the 11th verse. And then we're going to skip down to the 26th through the 30th verse in the NIV version. And it states, this is the account of Shem's family line. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad. Arphaxad. And after he became the father of Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and had other sons and daughters. After Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. This is the account of Terah's family line. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran became the father of Lot. While his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans, in the land of his birth. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Ishkar. Now Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive. So here they're giving us a little bit more genealogy now from Shem and looking at, well, when did Abram come on the scene? But at this point in Genesis, we are introduced to Abram, later called Abraham. Through his life of faith, God will begin the nation of Israel, reveal his law, institute the sacrificial system, and give his son, Jesus Christ. So this right here is very, very important to us, looking at this lineage here, because from Shem on down comes Abraham. And then after Abraham on down, there comes the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the descendants, okay? So we all are affected by this. So don't think that because you are Asian or you are Latin, or if you are African American, or if you are white, or whatever nationality that you are a part of, don't think that you are not included. Clearly, the Bible is telling us right here, right now, that yes, you are. You are included. You are a part of this. If we was to have Noah's DNA for us to analyze today, then yes, you will be part of one of his sons if we were able to do that. Okay? So when I looked at this was very, very interesting because, like I said, this is something that I do in my personal family. But, you know, as far as an African American, it is very difficult for us to trace back our ancestry. The only way now that we are able to figure out, well, which part of Africa did we come from is do DNA testing. But, you know, those records and stuff are forever gone by us being taken away from West Africa. We don't know anything about our culture or our history as far as when it came from Africa, let's say like from the 1600s to 1500s on back. We don't know. Okay, it's all a mystery to us. And even with some Caucasians, a lot of their family members, they moved over here from parts of Europe. And a lot of those records too, they don't have unless somebody told them that. But it's easier for them to find out because usually too with them, somebody kept the story going and told them that, our family came from this part of Europe, and so they do have a lot of, their information. But like I said, as far as the African American, it is difficult for us to figure out our lineage. But through it all of us, every last one of us, our family roots come back from the beginning of the Bible, from the book of Genesis, the origin of where it all got started. And so after the origin of when it got started, yes, stuff got scattered out. People move from place to place, marry this person, marry that person. And so, yes, it does get difficult. But the root of it, the root of the matter is that we are all part of the book of Genesis when it comes down to creation, to the beginning of us. That's where it all started from. Every last one of us. Okay. And so here now, we're looking at this particular story here, talking about the family of Terah. This is when the Bible begins to break it down and narrow it down so that we have a better understanding of Abram now. Because eventually, after the Bible starts talking about Noah and his descendants and the flood and the wickedness and all that was going on in the world, then the Bible is going to continue on telling the story a few years later. Well, I shouldn't say a few years later. It could be 100 something years later, because after Shem and Abraham, after Shem, we're looking at now 8 generations after the fact now is with Abram. So 8 generations now is when we start looking at Terah, who came on the scene now. And Terah is going to be the father of Abraham. All right, so let's look at the rest of the story here too. Looking at Genesis, the 11th chapter, the 31st through the 32nd verse. And it says, Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram. And together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years and he died in Haran. Okay, so here clearly they're talking about Terah, because Terah was the father of Abraham, and Abraham is the next major figure in the book of Genesis, and looking at his life story and looking at, well, what happened with them. So here we see how Terah and his family, along with Abraham, moved to a different region. And one of the reasons I found out was why Terah decided to move was that in Ur, it was a center of false worship. A center of false worship. Terah decided to leave Ur and take his family with him, perhaps moved by the influence of Abram. So this was a major concern of them living in this area. So people have various reasons as to, well, why they move. Like today in our time, we might move because of a job, or we want a safer environment for our children, or we like the country, we want space, want to be outdoors. Some people like to live near a river. Some people, they don't mind living close together up under people, and that's their own personal preference. So everybody has various reasons as to why they decide to move. And in this particular situation, the family moved from Ur because of false worshiping was going on there. People were worshiping idol gods and doing whatever wickedness that they felt like they wanted to do. But here, Abram has spoke. God has spoke to Abram and told him to leave. And that's when they decided to move. When God spoke to Abram. And they believe that that's the reason, and that's what influenced Terah to move. It was through Abram, when God was speaking to him and showing him things and telling him different things. It said that some commentators suggest that Abram's call to leave his native country had taken place already, and Terah was influenced by his son. Abram would distance himself from the false worship found in Ur and be instrumental in establishing the worship of one true God in his family line. So here God was speaking to Abram and letting him know and telling him different things about what was going on. And one of the things that God was doing now with Abram was establishing a covenant. He is making a promise, just as he did with Noah. He made a promise with Noah. He established a covenant. Now you see God talking about that again from the same lineage, from the same descendants. God had made promises to all of the descendants of receiving land. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars. Your descendants will be numerous. And he's telling them now to be fruitful and multiply. So he's saying this all over again. And this is what he is telling us today, to be fruitful and multiply. So God always has a plan. He stated his plan to humanity at the very start that they should scatter and fill the entire earth. When the people after Noah decided they would not follow his plan, God took the action of confusing their language, making it impossible for them to work together. Immediately following this scattering, Abram, later called Abraham, is introduced. Through him, God would bless the entire world with salvation made possible through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. All who would believe would be unified in Christ in faith and service to God, not unified in rebellion as at Babel. And all who believe would spend eternity in God's presence. Christians of every nation and language on earth. Everybody. It said Christians of every nation and every language. So this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning. It does not matter about your nationality. Black, white, Asian, Latino, Mexican, Russian, Italian, it does not matter. God does not look at all of that because he created us. He created us. And so all of us has a direct lineage, or we are a direct descendant from the book of Genesis. We are. So look for ways to join other believers in evangelism, acts of compassion, and other priorities of God's plan. Ask God to help you follow him, even when you don't understand where he's leading you. Attempt to cross at least one barrier, language or otherwise, to reach someone for Christ this week. So the next time when you see somebody from another nationality in the store standing up beside you, or you watching a movie or something like that, keep in mind that's your brother and that's your sister, because you share a common bond. You are descendants. You are the lineage from the book of Genesis, from the creator, God, the creator. From one lineage, he created all of us. And because that's what he told us from the very beginning with Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. And then he sends Noah as a reminder, fruitful and multiply. And then he go on to Abraham, be fruitful and multiply. All right, fruitful and multiply. And so as you can see throughout the Bible, it is set up through a timeline. And with these major figures, everybody is part of the same timeline, the same lineage. Okay? Because right after Abraham, then here comes Moses. Then after Moses, then here comes Joshua, part of the same timeline, same. Then after Joshua, then here comes King David. Okay, King David. Okay, the same lineage. King Solomon, the same lineage. So God knows exactly what he is doing. We just got to trust and believe in him, because he keep telling us that he got it. He got it. And then here we go, like the people at Babel want to do our own thing. And then that's when God comes down and messes it all up for us. And then we get mad and we get frustrated. And God is like, I didn't tell you to do that. You don't even include me in any of your plans. So how do you expect it to work if you don't even include me in any of your plans? Okay, so it's something to think about. So the next time when you're planning out things, make sure you include God in your plans. Don't be like the people in Babel. Okay, make sure he's included in your plans. So living it out. So further study you can do is read about Eve, mother of all, Genesis, the 3rd chapter, the 20th verse through the 4th chapter, the 2nd verse. Adam, father of all, Genesis, the 4th chapter, the 25th verse through the 5th through the 4th verse. God, maker of all people, the book of Psalms 100, 1 through 5, the gospel for all nations, Matthew, the 28th chapter, 18th through the 20th verses, all nations blessed in Abraham, Galatians, the 3rd chapter, the 6th through the 9th verse, and the saved from all nations, Revelation, 7th chapter, the 9th through the 17th verse. And I hope that this inspired you and motivated you. And I hope that you learned something new, okay, about your personal geology. Right?